Hello, you're listening to The Jury Box. This podcast offers a rare opportunity to step into the role of a juror. In each episode, you'll hear a real trial as jurors heard it, the facts, the law, and the arguments on both sides. Before the verdict is revealed, you'll be asked to make your own decision. So, take a breath and step into the jury box.
Welcome to the Jury Box.
Today, we ask you to step into a moment in time, a moment that put the very idea of self-defense on trial.
Your job, as always, is simple to state, but, well, incredibly difficult to do. You must set aside everything you think you know about this case.
Forget the headlines, forget the movies it inspired. You are now a citizen called to judgment.
And you can only consider the evidence presented right here in this courtroom.
So let's set the scene. The date is Saturday, December 22nd, 1984.
And the location is the number 2 IRT Express subway train heading downtown from the Bronx, New York City.
But you really have to understand what that means, what that felt like in 1984. It's not the New York City of today.
Not at all. I mean, the city was on edge, crime rates were incredibly high.
And the subway was sort of the epicenter of that fear. You know, the cars were covered inside and out with graffiti. You often couldn't even see out the windows.
It created this feeling of being trapped. The lighting was poor, the noise was deafening, it was a pressure cooker.
Exactly. A real pervasive sense of unease. So into this environment, we introduce the parties.
First, the defendant. His name is Bernhard Goetz. He's 37 years old.
He's an electrical engineer, described as having a slight build. He wears glasses. He's not, an intimidating figure.
No, not physically. But he's carrying something. Tucked into his waistband is an unlicensed, loaded Smith & Wesson revolver. A .38 caliber.
Unlicensed being the key word there.
Absolutely. Now, for the complainants.
There are 4 of them. 4 teenagers. Troy Canty, Barry Allen, James Ramseur, and Daryl Caby.
They're 18 and 19 years old. And they're riding together in the rear section of the 7th car of that train.
So you have the scene, Goetz, the 4 youths, and about 15 to 20 other passengers in this enclosed space, rattling through a dark tunnel beneath Manhattan.
Goetz gets on the train at 14th Street. He sits down near the 4 young men.
And witnesses would later say the teenagers were being, the word used was boisterous.
Boisterous, which can mean a lot of things.
It can mean anything from kids having a good time to, behavior that feels menacing, depending on your perspective.
Right. And then the encounter begins. 2 of the youths, Troy Canty and Barry Allen, they get up and they approach Bernhard Goetz.
And this is the moment. The spark that lights the fuse. Troy Canty speaks to Goetz.
He says, "Give me $5.
Just that.
Yeah.
Give me $5. Now, was it a polite request? Was it a demand?
Was it the start of a robbery? That is the entire question.
According to Goetz's later statements, the words themselves weren't the whole story. He said Canty had a gleam in his eye.
A gleam. And a smile that Goetz felt wasn't friendly at all. He felt it was predatory.
To Goetz, this wasn't panhandling. This was the opening act of a mugging he had experienced before. He believed he knew exactly what was coming next.
And so he decides to act first.
He stands up, he unzips his jacket, he pulls the .38 caliber revolver.
And he doesn't shout a warning. He doesn't say, "Get back."
No. He immediately establishes what's called a pattern of fire. He aims and fires from left to right very deliberately.
4 shots in rapid succession.
Bam, bam, bam. Just like that.
The first shot hits Troy Canty in the chest.
The second hits Barry Allen in the back as he was turning away.
The third hits James Ramseur in the arm and his side.
And the fourth shot actually misses. It misses its intended target, Daryl Caby.
So in a matter of seconds, the situation has completely changed. 3 of the 4 are shot. The immediate threat seems to be over.
Yes. And the gun, a 5-shot revolver, now has 1 bullet left.
And what happens with that final bullet? This is the most critical and the most disputed moment of the entire case.
It is. This is where the prosecution argues it crosses the line from self-defense into something else entirely.
Their version of events, which is based on Goetz's own taped confession, is that there was a pause.
A definite pause. The initial flurry is over. Goetz looks around the car. He sees Daryl Caby, who wasn't hit by the first 4 shots.
And where is Caby? Is he still a threat?
According to the prosecution, no. He's either sitting on the bench or he's cowering. He's not advancing. He is not attacking.
He's neutralized.
He is. And Goetz supposedly walks over to him, looks down at him, and says a sentence.
A sentence that is just bone-chilling.
You seem to be, all right, here's another.
And then he fires that fifth and final shot.
Point blank. That bullet severs Daryl Caby's spinal cord. It causes catastrophic permanent paralysis and brain damage.
A devastating injury that he would suffer from for the rest of his life.
So the shooting is over. The train screeches to a stop at a station. The conductor hears the commotion, the screaming, and runs into the car.
He sees Goots with the gun. He asks him, "Are you a police officer?"
A logical question. Goots says no. He tells the conductor they tried to rob me, but he doesn't wait around to give a statement.
No, he flees.
He jumps from the train car down onto the tracks and runs away into the darkness of the tunnel.
He eventually makes it out of the subway system, goes home, packs a bag, rents a car, and just drives. He heads north.
He is a fugitive, and he's actively covering his tracks.
Right. He drives all the way to Vermont. He finds a secluded spot, burns the blue jacket he was wearing.
Because he thinks it might be used to identify him.
And then he dismantles the gun, he takes it apart piece by piece and scatters the parts in the woods. He's trying to make the primary evidence disappear.
But back in New York, the story explodes. The media dubs him the subway vigilante.
And the public reaction is, it's not what you might expect.
No, it's overwhelmingly supportive of the shooter. People were so fed up with crime, so scared, that the idea of someone finally fighting back, it resonated. People were calling him a hero.
A hero? While the police are conducting a massive manhunt for him, it's a bizarre situation.
It is.
Well,
But Goots knows he can't run forever. 9 days later, on December 31st, New Year's Eve,
he walks into a police station in Concord, New Hampshire, and turns himself in.
he says to the desk sergeant, "I am the person they are seeking in New York."
And from there, he is brought back to New York, and the legal battle begins. He's indicted.
The charges are serious. 4 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of assault, reckless endangerment for firing a gun in a crowded car, and of course, criminal possession of a weapon.
His defense is justification. Or, as most of us know it, self-defense.
And now we have to get into the law itself. Because what you think self-defense is might not be what the law in New York actually says it is.
This is crucial for you, as a juror, to understand. It's all about New York penal law, section 35.15.
The core of it revolves around this idea of a reasonable person.
Right. It's not enough for the defendant to just say, well, I personally believed I was in danger. That's a subjective belief.
Right. If the law only cared about that, your personal subjective belief, things could get chaotic.
Yeah.
Anyone could claim they thought they were in danger, no matter how irrational that fear was.
So the law adds a second part, an objective test.
It's what's known as a hybrid test.
Yeah.
The jury, you have to decide if a reasonable person in the exact same situation as the defendant would have held that same belief.
And the situation is key. Does a reasonable person have Bernhard Goots's life experiences?
That's the million-dollar question. Because Goots had a history. This is a critical piece of evidence for the defense. He had been brutally mugged in 1981.
He was injured, traumatized. He felt the justice system had failed him then.
The defense argues that his past trauma is part of this situation. A reasonable person who has been violently attacked before is going to perceive a threat differently than someone who hasn't. Their fear is, primed.
It makes their response, their heightened fear, more reasonable.
Potentially. That's for you to decide. Then there's the duty to retreat.
Another legal hurdle. Generally in New York, you can't use deadly force if you can safely get away from the danger.
You have a duty to retreat if you can do so with complete safety.
But there's a huge exception to that rule.
A critical one for this case.
Yeah.
You do not have a duty to retreat if you reasonably believe you are being robbed. Forcible stealing.
So it all comes back to those first words.
Give me $5.
Yeah.
If you, the jury, believe that was the start of a robbery, then Gertz had no legal duty to run away. He could stand his ground.
But if you believe it was just aggressive panhandling, he should have tried to leave before pulling a gun. It's an incredible amount of weight to put on the interpretation of a single phrase.
It is. So with that legal framework in mind, let's look at the arguments you would have heard in that courtroom. First, the prosecution.
Their theory of the case was clear. This was not self-defense. This was an act of vengeance. Volcanic fury, as they put it.
They portrayed Goetz as an emotionally troubled individual who was, in a way, hunting for a confrontation.
And their star witness was, ironically, Bernhard Goetz himself.
Absolutely. They played the audio tapes of his confession in Concord, New Hampshire for hours. And the jury heard Goetz, in his own voice, say some incredibly damaging things.
Things like, my intention was to murder them.
To hurt them, to make them suffer as much as possible.
He doesn't say, my intention was to stop them or to get away. He uses the word murder.
It's devastating testimony, the prosecution argues. This isn't the voice of a man in fear. This is the voice of a man filled with rage, a man who wanted to inflict pain.
They also pointed to the methodical nature of the shooting, the pattern of fire.
Yes. They argued this wasn't a panic, wild spray of bullets. This was calculated. He aimed. He fired one by one. It showed control, not a loss of it.
And then they focused heavily on the fifth shot.
The shot that paralyzed Daryl Cabey. This was the cornerstone of their attempted murder charge.
They argued that Cabey was seated, helpless, posing no threat whatsoever, and that Goetz calmly walked over.
Said, you don't look so bad, or you seem to be all right, here's another, and executed him.
That one act, they claimed, proved his intent wasn't just to defend, but to kill. That it was excessive force, far beyond what any reasonable person would do.
Even if you believe the first 4 shots were justified, how can you possibly justify that 5th one? That was their question to the jury.
A very powerful argument. Now let's turn to the defense. How do they counter this?
The defense, led by a very theatrical lawyer named Barry Slotnick, painted a completely different picture.
Their theory was that Goetz was the victim. He was a man acting in pure self-defense against what they called savages and predators.
They leaned heavily into the fear that permeated New York at the time. They essentially put the city's crime problem on trial.
Their key evidence starts with Goetz's prior trauma.
That 1981 mugging. They argued it wasn't just a backstory. It was the lens through which he saw the world. His fear was reasonable for him, given what he'd been through.
And they worked to establish that the threat itself was real.
Right. It came out that the youths had screwdrivers on them. Now, Goetz didn't see the screwdrivers, so he couldn't have been reacting to them.
But the defense used it to paint a picture of their character. They weren't just going downtown for pizza. They admitted they were going to try and rob arcade machines.
It bolstered the narrative that these were not innocent kids. They were, as the defense put it, out for trouble.
But how did the defense deal with the confession tapes? With Goetz's own words about wanting to murder them?
They argued it was just talk. That he was agitated, confused, and trying to sound tough after the fact. But their main counterargument was a scientific one.
They brought in a psychiatrist, Dr. Udwitz.
Yes. And he introduced a concept that became central to the trial. Goetz went on automatic pilot.
Automatic pilot, what does that mean in this context?
The theory is that when a person experiences extreme mortal fear, their rational brain, the prefrontal cortex, shuts down. The primitive brain, the amygdala, takes over.
Fight or flight.
Pure fight or flight.
Yeah.
Dr. Udwitz testified that Goetz wasn't making conscious decisions. He was a biological machine reacting to a stimulus. His body took over.
And this explains the fifth shot.
That was the argument. The defense claimed the entire sequence, all 5 shots, happened in about 1.6 seconds. One continuous reflexive action.
So there was no pause, no, you seem to be all right.
They argued that if Goetz said that, it was a false memory created by the trauma and adrenaline. They claimed it was just one blur of action. Bam, 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 bam. He couldn't have stopped himself even if he wanted to.
And to really drive this feeling of being threatened home, Slotnick did something very unusual in the courtroom.
A dramatic reenactment.
Yeah.
He had 4 large men stand up and surround the defense table, boxing Goetz in.
To show the jury what it felt like.
To make them feel that claustrophobia, that sense of being trapped, of being caged by 4 potential aggressors. He wanted them to feel the threat physically.
So now we have the jury's dilemma. You, sitting in the box, you have to weigh all of this.
You have the chilling confession tapes on one side, the automatic pilot theory on the other.
You have the reality of a young man, Daryl Cabey, who will never walk again.
And you have the reality of a city terrified of crime, where many people felt Goetz did what they all wished they had the courage to do.
You also have to consider the credibility of the witnesses. The 2 youths who testified, Canty and Ramseur, well, their criminal backgrounds and their demeanor on the stand did not help the prosecution's case.
No, Ramseur in particular was so disruptive he was held in contempt of court. It made it easy for the jury to believe he could have been aggressive on the train.
So you have to decide, for each shot, for each man, was Goetz's fear reasonable?
Did he intend to kill them, which is attempted murder? Or did he just intend to stop them, which could be justified assault?
Did he act recklessly, endangering the other 15 passengers? Or was his focus just on the threat in front of him?
And finally, the gun. It's undisputed he did not have a license. That's a separate question from the shooting itself.
So the arguments are done, the evidence is in. The future of Bernhard Goetz is in your hands.
Before we tell you what the jury decided, stop for a moment. If you were in the jury box, how would you vote? If you'd like, you can pause the podcast now and think it through. When you're ready, press play and we'll tell you what the jury decided.
After days of deliberation, the jury returned.
The courtroom was packed. The entire city was holding its breath.
The jury foreman stood and delivered the verdict. On the 4 counts of attempted murder.
Not guilty.
On the 4 counts of assault.
Not guilty.
On the charge of reckless endangerment.
Not guilty.
A stunning result. They acquitted him on every single charge related to the shooting itself.
The logic, from what jurors said afterwards, was that the prosecution had not disproven the justification defense beyond a reasonable doubt.
They accepted that a reasonable person in Goetz's situation, with his past trauma, surrounded by 4 young men demanding money in that environment, could have feared for his life.
They seem to have bought the automatic pilot or rapid succession theory for the 5th shot, or at least they had enough doubt that they couldn't convict him for it.
But he wasn't completely free.
No, there was that final charge. Criminal possession of a weapon in the 3rd degree.
The unlicensed gun.
On that count, the jury found him guilty.
There was no defense for that. He knowingly carried an illegal firearm.
So the outcome was this paradox. The jury said the shooting was justified, but the tool he used for that justified act was illegal.
What was his sentence for the gun charge?
The judge sentenced him to 1 year in jail. He ultimately served 8 months.
8 months for shooting 4 people, one of whom was permanently paralyzed.
It's a sentence that, to this day, people argue about passionately. But that wasn't the last time a jury would look at this case.
Right. Years later, Daryl Caby's family brought a civil lawsuit against Goetz.
And this is important. In a civil trial, the burden of proof is much lower. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's just a preponderance of the evidence. Which side is more likely true, even if it's just 51%.
And what did that civil jury decide?
They rejected the self-defense claim. They found Bernhard Goetz liable for Caby's injuries.
They awarded Caby $43 million in damages.
Money Goetz never had and would never pay. But symbolically, it was a powerful statement. One jury said not guilty, another said you are responsible.
Which really gets to the heart of why this case is so difficult. It forced people to draw a line between self-protection and vigilantism.
And it showed that the definition of reasonableness can change depending on who's in the jury box.
It's a case that asks whether your personal history, your trauma, can justify your present actions.
And there's still no easy answer to that question.
Thank you for joining us in the Jury Box.
You are listening to The Jury Box.